"You're so predictable. I need a real man who's spontaneous and exciting, not someone who plans everything to death." She said this while I was down on one knee at Chicago's most exclusive revolving rooftop restaurant, holding the sapphire engagement ring she'd circled in a jewelry catalog 3 months earlier. I spent 12 weeks coordinating with the restaurant management to secure the same corner table where we'd shared dessert during my accounting firm's holiday party 2 years ago, the spot where Melody had gazed at the city skyline and mentioned how romantic the setting would be for major life moments. The ring had cost me 3 months' salary as a corporate tax analyst, but I'd saved meticulously because I knew she'd dreamed of a sapphire center stone surrounded by diamonds, exactly like her grandmother's antique setting that she'd shown me photos of dozens of times. I'd rehearsed my speech about building our future together, about how her ambition in marketing complemented my steady career trajectory, about the life we could create with careful planning and mutual support. The sunset timing was perfect, the restaurant's rotation positioning our table to overlook Grant Park just as I'd calculated, and I felt confident that this moment would mark the beginning of the next phase of our relationship. Instead, Melody burst into laughter that echoed across the dining room, loud enough that neighboring couples stopped their conversations to stare at us. She gestured dramatically toward the bar area where a leather-jacketed stranger was nursing a whiskey, explaining to everyone within earshot that my boring stability made her feel trapped like she was dating her accountant instead of a real man. I listened to her describe how she needed someone who could surprise her with spontaneous adventures, who lived for excitement instead of spreadsheets and retirement planning, someone who understood that passion couldn't be scheduled like a quarterly report. The other diners watched in fascination as she continued her performance, apparently enjoying the attention while completely oblivious to my humiliation. I quietly closed the ring box, slipped it into my jacket pocket, and stood up from my kneeling position without saying a single word. I placed enough cash on the table to cover our expensive dinner plus a generous tip for our server who looked mortified on my behalf, then walked calmly to the elevator while Melody called after me asking where I thought I was going. The last thing I heard as the elevator doors closed was her explaining to the remaining diners that some people just can't handle honest communication about relationship needs. I drove straight to my cousin Derek's apartment in suburban Naperville, arriving at his doorstep with nothing but my car keys and the engagement ring still burning a hole in my jacket pocket. Derek took one look at my face and wordlessly pulled out his pull-out couch, surrounding me with moving boxes from his recent job transfer while I stared at the ceiling trying to process what had just happened at that restaurant. I'd planned every detail of that proposal for 3 months, coordinating schedules and making reservations and choosing the perfect moment, only to discover that my careful attention to detail was exactly what Melody found suffocating about our relationship. The next morning, I woke up before dawn and drove directly to the jewelry store, where the manager recognized me from my multiple visits during the selection process and quietly processed the return without asking uncomfortable questions. I received 60% of what I'd paid, losing nearly $2,000 to their restocking policies, but I felt relieved to convert that symbol of rejected commitment back into practical cash. While Melody was at her Saturday morning Pilates class, I returned to our shared condo in Lincoln Park and systematically packed my computer equipment, work clothes, and personal documents into boxes that fit neatly in my sedan's trunk. I left my condo key and garage door remote on the granite kitchen island next to a typed note explaining that I'd coordinate with movers through my attorney to retrieve my remaining furniture within the week. The note was professional and cordial, the kind of communication I'd send to a business associate rather than someone I'd planned to marry, because I realized that's essentially what our relationship had become from her perspective. I was packing my last box when I heard her car pull into the garage, so I quickly loaded everything and drove away while she was still gathering her yoga mat and water bottle. My phone started ringing before I'd even reached the highway, but I let every call go to voicemail while focusing on the practical steps I needed to take to extract myself completely from this situation. By evening, I'd accumulated 32 missed calls and listened to her voicemails evolving from confused questions about why I was being so dramatic to increasingly frantic pleas as she realized I'd actually removed my belongings and changed my emergency contact information at work. Her final message revealed genuine shock that someone she'd considered predictably devoted could walk away permanently without negotiation or discussion, apparently never considering that my reliability had limits when it came to being publicly humiliated and dismissed. Within 4 weeks of that disastrous proposal, I'd secured a senior tax analyst position at Morrison & Associates, a prestigious accounting firm in Phoenix that specialized in corporate restructuring and had been recruiting me for over a year. I liquidated my Chicago life with the same methodical precision that had impressed my supervisors during quarterly audits, selling my furniture to a consignment company, transferring my investment accounts, and coordinating my relocation with efficiency that would have made my former colleagues proud. I deleted all my social media accounts, obtained a new phone number through my Phoenix employer, and sent a clear message to mutual friends that any communication about Melody would result in permanent friendship termination. The moving truck departed on a Tuesday morning while I was already settling into my temporary corporate housing in Scottsdale, having flown out the previous weekend to sign paperwork and establish Arizona residency. Meanwhile, Melody was frantically calling my family members and searching my professional network on LinkedIn, insisting to anyone who would listen that there had been a terrible miscommunication at the restaurant and that she was just testing my commitment level to see how much I really cared about our relationship. My older sister Rebecca, who'd never particularly liked Melody's entitled attitude during family gatherings, bluntly told her that if she wasn't ready for my predictable love, she shouldn't have wasted 2 years accepting my consistent devotion and financial support for her expensive lifestyle choices. Rebecca later reported that Melody had become hysterical during their phone conversation, apparently realizing for the first time that my family viewed her as someone who took advantage of my generous nature rather than appreciated it. Through LinkedIn updates that I'd forgotten to restrict, Melody discovered that I'd already started my new position and purchased a desert home with a swimming pool in Paradise Valley, completely cutting off any possibility of reconciliation or even contact. My new colleagues welcomed me with challenging projects and invitations to networking events, while I focused on establishing professional relationships and exploring a city where nobody knew about my romantic humiliation. The irony wasn't lost on me that my supposedly boring predictability had enabled me to execute a complete life transformation in less than a month, while Melody was left calling Chicago area accounting firms trying to track down my forwarding information. In Phoenix, I channeled my analytical skills into building a specialized tax consulting practice for tech startups, discovering that my methodical approach to complex financial structures was exactly what emerging companies needed to navigate federal regulations and venture capital requirements. I joined a competitive tennis league at the Desert Mountain Club, where my consistent baseline game and strategic thinking translated surprisingly well to doubles matches with successful entrepreneurs and medical professionals who appreciated reliability over flashy shots. Weekend drives through Sedona became my new passion as I explored desert landscape photography, finding that the patience required for capturing perfect lighting conditions at sunrise and sunset helped me appreciate the stability and consistency that Melody had mocked so cruelly at that restaurant. My disciplined approach to fitness and professional development transformed me both physically and mentally, as I realized that my predictable nature was actually a strength that enabled me to set goals and achieve them systematically rather than chasing impulsive thrills that led nowhere meaningful. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, Melody's social media had become a desperate showcase of her exciting adventures with increasingly dangerous-looking men, posting photos from underground fighting events where blood splattered the canvas, motorcycle rallies where she posed with leather-clad strangers, and late-night club scenes that looked more desperate than glamorous. Her captions constantly referenced finally living authentically and dating real men who weren't afraid of life, but the forced enthusiasm in her posts suggested someone trying to convince herself more than her followers. Former mutual friends reported that she constantly brought up our relationship at social gatherings, simultaneously claiming she had dodged a boring bullet while obsessively monitoring my old LinkedIn profile and asking everyone if they'd heard any news about my new life in Arizona. Rebecca mentioned during our monthly phone calls that Melody had even contacted our high school friends trying to gather information about my relocation, apparently unable to accept that someone she'd considered safely predictable could completely disappear from her orbit. The contrast between my growing contentment in Phoenix and her increasingly frantic attempts to prove she was living her best life would have been amusing if it wasn't so obviously desperate and self-destructive. 18 months after relocating to Arizona, I met Grace Martinez at a charity tennis tournament benefiting Phoenix Children's Hospital, where she was volunteering between her shifts as a pediatric emergency room physician at Banner Desert Medical Center. Grace appreciated my reliability from our first conversation, mentioning how refreshing it was to meet someone who actually showed up when they said they would and followed through on commitments, qualities that were essential in her high-pressure medical environment where lives depended on consistent performance. Our relationship developed through quiet dinner dates at local restaurants where we discussed our shared goals, morning tennis matches where she demonstrated a competitive drive that matched my own, and volunteer work at the Children's Hospital where I handled their fundraising spreadsheets while she provided medical care. From our third date onward, we openly discussed our timeline for engagement and children, with Grace expressing genuine excitement about finding someone who wanted to plan a stable future rather than chase unpredictable adventures that led nowhere meaningful. When Grace posted a photo of us at the Arizona Medical Association Charity Gala, wearing my grandmother's vintage pearl necklace that I'd retrieved from my safety deposit box, Melody somehow discovered the image despite my deleted social media presence and began creating fake accounts to leave increasingly unhinged comments about rebound relationships and people who settle for boring instead of passion. Grace took screenshots of the harassment before blocking each account, while I learned through my cousin Derek that Melody had sabotaged 4 different relationships since our breakup, becoming hysterical whenever men mentioned introducing her to their families or discussed any kind of future planning beyond the next weekend. Rebecca reported that Melody's own family was becoming concerned about her pattern of explosive breakups and her inability to maintain relationships with men who had stable careers and long-term goals. The irony was perfect that while I was building something meaningful with someone who valued my consistent nature, Melody was destroying every opportunity she had with men who possessed the very qualities she claimed to want but apparently couldn't handle when they came with expectations of mutual respect and commitment. 2.5 years after that rooftop disaster, Grace and I had an elegant outdoor wedding at the Four Seasons Resort Scottsdale, surrounded by close family members and professional colleagues who genuinely celebrated our partnership and shared goals for building a medical practice together where I'd handle the business operations while she focused on patient care. Our honeymoon perfectly combined Grace's pediatric emergency medicine conference in Zurich with my photography expedition through the Swiss Alps, blending our professional development with personal interests as we hiked mountain trails and attended medical seminars with equal enthusiasm. The wedding photos showed 2 people who were genuinely happy to commit to building a stable future together, rather than performing excitement for social media validation. Meanwhile, Melody had impulsively moved in with Travis Kowalski, a professional mixed martial arts fighter she'd met at a CrossFit gym, apparently panicking as she approached 30 while watching her college friends achieve career promotions and announce engagements to men with stable incomes and family-oriented goals. Her social media posts featured increasingly desperate attempts to prove their passionate connection, but Rebecca's friends in Chicago privately reported constant police visits to their South Side apartment for domestic disturbances and Melody's growing isolation from her support network as Travis discouraged her from maintaining friendships or family relationships. The contrast between our peaceful honeymoon photos and her chaotic Instagram stories couldn't have been more stark, with her posts featuring broken furniture, late-night emergency room visits that she claimed were from gym accidents, and cryptic messages about learning what real passion meant compared to boring stability. Within 11 months, Melody had filed a restraining order against Travis and moved back in with her parents in their suburban ranch house, posting bitter quotes about toxic masculinity and learning the difference between excitement and genuine danger. Her attempts to rebuild her life at 29, living in her childhood bedroom while working retail jobs to pay off credit card debt accumulated during her exciting adventures, provided a sobering contrast to the foundation that Grace and I were building together through careful planning and mutual support. On our second wedding anniversary, Grace and I purchased a custom-built home in Paradise Valley with panoramic mountain views, Grace 6 months pregnant with our first child and my tax consulting practice expanding to serve Fortune 500 clients who valued my methodical approach to complex corporate restructuring projects. Our social media showed authentic professional and personal achievements rather than desperate attempts to prove anything, with Grace receiving recognition from the American Academy of Pediatrics for her emergency protocol innovations and my landscape photography being featured in Arizona tourism campaigns that generated additional consulting referrals from impressed clients. We spent quiet evenings planning our baby's nursery together, discussing preschool options and college savings strategies with the same careful consideration that had once annoyed Melody but made Grace feel cherished and secure about our family's future. Exactly 4 years after that rooftop rejection, as we were celebrating Grace's pregnancy announcement and my promotion to senior partner at Morrison & Associates, Melody sent a desperate Instagram message that somehow reached me through Grace's account, confessing that leaving me was the worst decision of her entire life and that she now understood that predictable meant reliable and trustworthy rather than boring and suffocating. Her message begged me to reconnect and talk through our mistakes because she was finally ready for real stability after years of chasing excitement that had left her emotionally and financially devastated, living with her parents while working at a department store makeup counter and dating men who viewed her as temporary entertainment rather than marriage material. I showed Grace the message while she was reviewing pediatric medical journals at our kitchen island, and we shared an amused look about the irony of someone who had publicly humiliated me for being too stable now desperately wanting exactly what she had rejected so cruelly. I responded by sending Melody a single photo from our wedding day with no caption, then blocked her account permanently while Grace laughed and rubbed her growing belly. That evening, watching Grace research the latest developments in pediatric emergency medicine while unconsciously planning our child's future with the same methodical care that defined our entire relationship, I realized that Melody's cruel dismissal of my predictable nature had actually freed me to find someone who treasured the very qualities she had mocked, leading to a life far better than anything I could have built with someone who valued excitement over commitment.